So as you may have guessed from that little intro riff, there's going to be a little bit of an AC/DC theme to this video today. In this video, we're going to be talking about the guitar style and the guitar tone of AC/DC rhythm guitar player Malcolm Young. So if you're a fan of rock music and classic rock, AC/DC are a band that will definitely be on your radar. Now, more often than not, lead guitar player Angus Young is the one who gets all the attention because of all his sort of super flash pentatonic licks and his undeniable huge stage presence. But Malcolm is often overlooked. Now, Malcolm is Angus's brother, his older brother for that matter, and Malcolm really does hold down the rhythm in AC/DC. He is the powerhouse that sort of drives the engine of AC/DC while Angus takes to the front of the stage and does all the flashy stuff. But it's so easy to overlook Malcolm because he just sits at the back of the stage and gets the job done. So in this video, we're going to pay some dues to Malcolm, look at his guitar style and his guitar tone in a little bit of detail, and figure out why he is such a great rhythm player in the world of rock. So through the course of this video, there's going to be a couple of different classic AC/DC riffs featured. These have all been recorded by me with the gear that we're going to talk about in this video. So they're my recreations of those classic riffs to try and get in that Malcolm Young tonal ballpark. If you want to learn how to play these riffs and get the tabs for them, there is a link to a blog post down below in the description to my guitar course website, writenotesmusictuition.com. You can go over there, hit the link and enjoy those tabs completely free of charge. They're in the blog on the website for you guys to check out as well, so you can learn those Malcolm Young riffs. As well as talking about all the classic gear that Malcolm Young used to produce these classic riffs and classic tracks, we're going to be talking about how you guys can use some different gear to dial in some Malcolm Young style tones. And I'm going to be looking at a few different pieces of equipment that I'm going to be featuring through this video with the aim of getting in that correct tonal ballpark. So while I'm not getting paid for this video, you can consider this a sponsored video because I have received some help from some good friends of mine in order to make this video. There's a pedal I'll be talking about later on in the video from J Rocket Audio. They've kindly provided me with that pedal for the purpose of this video. And my friends at Gretsch have loaned me a guitar to use as well, all to get closer to that classic Malcolm Young sound. So let's talk about Malcolm Young's gear. Malcolm Young's rig has always been pretty simple and pretty stripped back. There are just two main components to his rig that are sort of the essentials to get his tone. There are plenty of different ways to get around this tone, but if you really want to get close to that Malcolm tone, you just need two classic things, which is a gretsch with Filtertron pickups and a Marshall amp of some kind. So the original guitar that Malcolm uses, and this is the one that's pretty much featured since the start of AC/DC right up until his untimely passing, is a 1963 Gretsch Jet Firebird. Now originally this was a 3 Filtertron pickup guitar and it used to be red, but the guitar that you'll mostly associate Malcolm with just has one pickup with 2 empty pickup cavities, and it's a plain top. Now this guitar did start life as a red guitar with 3 pickups like I said, but over the years Malcolm modified this a lot. He took 2 of the pickups out, the neck and middle pickup, because he basically never used them. So he got rid of those altogether. He stripped the red top down to a plain wood, and the guitar actually originally had a tremolo system on there as well, which again he removed and had the original hole covered over with a custom fit black plate. When Malcolm actually bought this guitar, the middle Filtertron had already been replaced and the hole routed out slightly to accommodate a Gibson humbucker. So it was like a Filtertron humbucker Filtertron setup with pickups, which is quite interesting. You can actually see this humbucker in some of the early AC/DC music videos. So if you check out the music video for It's a Long Way to the Top, you'll see Malcolm playing a red Firebird with a humbucker in the middle of the pickups. This is the same guitar that he played later on in AC/DC, but obviously, like I said, it was modified as the years went by. The other main component to Malcolm Young's guitar sound was the strings that he used. He used a very heavy gauge set of strings. So we're talking 12 to 56 here with a wound G. So this is almost like an acoustic set on an electric. For the most part, AC/DC were tuned standard tuning, but there's a couple of instances where they did intentionally go down to E flat. Some tracks you may find are slightly sharp or slightly flat of standard. This is completely normal of bands of this era where the group were tuned together, so they're in tune with each other but not necessarily in tune to what we would refer to as being in tune with a specific note. So you may find some AC/DC classics are slightly sharp or flat, but we're in the ballpark of standard tuning for most of their back catalogue. Obviously, with such heavy gauge strings and a really percussive attack with the right hand, Malcolm's rhythm style was incredibly powerful. He didn't really do too much with the lead guitar stuff, so you're never going to see him bending around on those strings. It's mostly those big crashing chords, and obviously having those heavy gauge strings will really reinforce those big fat rhythm tones. Malcolm has pretty much always been a Marshall amps guy. He's used everything from your classic JMPs and JTM 45s through to some super basses and some super leads, but his number one amp was a 1971 Marshall Super Bass. This is the amp that he sort of would use for everything when he had the chance. This was the go-to amp for that Malcolm Young tone. There are a bunch of different sources online claiming to have the perfect Malcolm Young amp settings. So obviously if you're using a 70s super bass, it's going to be a loud amp. Big part of Malcolm's sound was the volume, so obviously you've got to get that amp cooking to get that broken up tone. If you want to get close to his tone, you can dial the presence to 3, the bass to 1, the mid to about 5 or 6, and the treble to about the same. Malcolm didn't really have too much of an extreme EQ either way, other than cutting that bass. So he does have quite a nice attack to his tone, but the mid and the treble are pretty much central, with a little bit of a boost either way just to suit the sound. Most of the articles online will quote Malcolm as using Celestion Vintage 30 speakers, but given that AC/DC started in the early 70s, there's a high probability that you're probably hearing some Celestion greenbacks at some point as well on some recordings. Again, mostly Marshall style cabs were used in the live situation. He may have used some other stuff in the studio, but predominantly live. It's the 71 Super Bass with whatever other Marshall Super Basses or JTM 45s he could get his hands on, and Marshall 4x12 cabinets. So really that's sort of the bulk of what you need to know about Malcolm's rig. It's a 63 Gretsch Firebird with a single Filtertron in the bridge through a cranked early 70s Marshall Super Bass. So let's talk about the gear that I'm going to be using in this video and the gear that I did use to create those classic riffs that you're hearing. So the guitar that I have on loan from my friends at Gretsch is this Electromatic G5222. In this finish they refer to as aged natural. So obviously this is not a Malcolm Young signature guitar, but you can pretty much see from the visuals that it's very much based on the type of thing that Malcolm played. So Malcolm actually played a Firebird. This is not a Firebird, but it's very much based on that aesthetic. Also going in line with the Malcolm Young vibe, this has got a black back and sides just like his as well. His would not have been a gloss top because he actually stripped the original finish off his. This one is a gloss top, but I think we can forgive that for the purpose of this video. This has a pair of Gretsch's black top Filtertron style pickups, but again, in sticking with that Malcolm Young theme, I'm only going to be using the bridge pickup in this video, and you've only heard the bridge pickup of this guitar in the clips of the AC/DC riffs you're hearing. If you want to know more about this guitar, please keep checking back on the channel. There's going to be a full-length demo of this coming up very, very soon. If that demo is already out, you can hit the link in the top corner right now. I'm also going to be using this pedal from my friends at J Rocket Audio for this video. This is the 45 caliber. So the 45 caliber is a Marshall JTM 45 style pedal in a box. The inspiration from this pedal came from the Malcolm Young Crunch tone, and also a combination of that with the Pete Townshend Live at Leeds tone. So this is a great pedal if you want that sort of Marshall in a box vibe. And the amp I'm using for this video is my Cool Amplification 11. The 11 is essentially like a 70s plexi. It's based off an original 73 JMP, so it's pretty close to Malcolm's 71. Not quite the same, but it's very, very close. You can get that big, crunchy, open 70s Marshall sound. I'm actually running the amp pretty clean today. I'm not using any drive from the amp. You could dial in the drive tones on the amp, but I really want to showcase the 45 caliber as being a great way to get in that ballpark as well. The amp is running through the 2 notes Torpedo Captor X, which is running an IR of a 4x12 Marshall style cab with Celestion Vintage 30 speakers in a big studio environment with a condenser mic and an SM57 on there. Alright, so now let's talk about how you guys can dial in a Malcolm Young style tone of your own with your own gear. So obviously I'm using the Gretsch G5222 here. Like I said, I'm just using that bridge Filtertron. If you're going to use a bridge humbucker for this, you might want to shave off a little bit more of the low end with an EQ pedal or by dialing the bass back a little bit more on your amp. A Filtertron pickup will not have as much low end as a humbucker, so obviously you do have to keep that in mind if you are using a humbucker. But if you can get your hands on a Filtertron style pickup, that will be perfect for this kind of tone. So I did mention that I was using my Cool Amplification 11, which is a 70 style plexi amp. So I am running this clean at the moment, so it sounds like this. I've got it at this clean point where if I dig in a bit more, it does crunch up. So that's pretty clean by plexi standards. I've got the gain on 1 because I didn't want any of the drive to come from the amp unless I really dig in. I've got the bass on 2, the mid on 5, and the treble on 6. You can boost or lower those mid and treble frequencies depending on the guitar and the pickups you're using as well. There are certain instances in AC/DC's back catalogue where Malcolm's tone is slightly brighter than others as well. I've got the presence on 3 today, and I've got the volume cranked up at 8. I could clean that up a little bit more if I wanted to, just by dialing back the master volume. So with the circuit of this amp, it reacts like a 70s Marshall. So if you crank it, you get a little bit more juice out of it. But because I've got the gain quite low, it's retaining that clean sound with a lot of dynamics. So if I wanted to dig in and keep it clean, I'd just bring the master down a little bit to compensate. This is a 50 watt head. Malcolm would typically use 100 watt heads, so there's a lot more clean headroom there as well. And I'm also running this for the 2 notes Captor X as well, so obviously there's no super loud volume in the room. With this being a 50 watt amp, it's not really practical for me to push the master up to 8 in a home setting, so obviously the Captor X is really saving me there because it's allowing me to really work the power and preamps of the head without getting those sort of deafening volumes at home. You could easily get this tone if you were pushing this through a 4x12, but obviously for the practicality of making this video at home, I'm not doing that. I'm using attenuation. So you've heard the cleanish plexi tone I've dialed in there, but what's really doing the heavy lifting here is the J-Rocket 45 caliber. So you can see the way I've got this set. I've actually got the treble boosted and the bass cut, so obviously sticking with that Malcolm Young bass cut thing. I've actually trimmed a little bit more bass off with the pedal. The gain is just below halfway. This isn't a super gainy pedal anyway, but I've kept that gain fairly low, and I'm using a little bit of a volume boost here just to kick the amp a little bit harder. So I'm just going to play a little bit more, and then I'll turn the pedal on so you can hear how that's affecting the sound. So with a combination of a Filtertron style pickup, a Marshall amp of some sort, and maybe even a Marshall in a box style pedal like this, That's how you can get pretty close to a Malcolm Young style tone. That is the tone I've used for all the guitar tracks on the riffs you've heard as well. Final thing I want to do with you guys before we wrap this video up is talk a little bit about the rhythm style of Malcolm Young. So if you're someone who's trying to get a little bit of that Malcolm Young aggression or energy into your own riffs, here's what you can do. So a lot of the Malcolm riffs are obviously based around those big ringing open chords. So let's say we're using A and D as a good starting point here. Now Malcolm is a very heavy-handed player, so he's not using a ton of gain. A lot of the gain comes from the aggression of the pick, and that really comes across when we're playing AC/DC style riffs. So if I'm playing a big chordal riff with an open A, an open D, and an open G, for instance, and I'm picking it softly, it's going to sound like this. There's a big difference in how this sounds if you really dig in. So like I said, Malcolm would really dig into those big chordal riffs. So don't be afraid of really getting stuck into those riffs and using a bit of aggression. Like I said earlier in the video, he did also use very heavy strings. So if you're really digging in like that, playing a set of 9-gauge strings, they're probably not going to hold up as well as a set of 12s. Malcolm used a lot of tension in those strings, so when he's really hitting the guitar hard, it comes across. Another thing you can do, which is pretty cool, is keep a consistent droning note going. So I'm going to use an open A for this, which I'm going to palm mute. I'm doing like an 8th note thing there, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and on the beat. This is sort of reminiscent of the AC/DC riff, If You Want Blood, You Got It. This is sort of something Malcolm does a lot, where he'll keep this driving rhythm going and he'll move different chords within that bar. So again, we can lean on that A and D chord again. That creates a real kind of urgent sound to his rhythm playing. It sort of really pushes the riff along. You can play that without the driving riff. But it doesn't quite have the same urgency as adding that palm muted A string in between everything. Another thing that Malcolm is really well known for doing in riffs is leaving space for the riff to breathe. So think of riffs like Highway to Hell or Back in Black, where we've got this space between everything. When it comes to leaving space in riffs, Malcolm may also use these things that are sort of reminiscent of Pete Townsend, which is a great way to crash into a chord. So to do this, we're applying 2 notes before the beat. So there I'm actually starting my A chord on the 1 beat. But what I can do is I can do this Townsend style crash into it when I go and a 1. So there's a few little Malcolm Young style rhythm tricks you guys can add to your own playing as well. Let me know down below in the comments what your favorite Malcolm Young rhythm moment is, and also what your favorite Malcolm Young tone is, because obviously we've covered a ballpark tone in this video, but he's had quite a few different variations on this classic tone throughout AC/DC's career. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of the gear I've featured as well, and how close you guys think I've gotten to some of those classic tones. I'd love to hear what you think, and also I'd love to hear what you guys think about Malcolm Young and all things AC/DC. So let's have a good chat about that down below in the comments. You can check out links to all the gear I've used in this video as well down below. there are some links to all of that. And like I said, if you want any of the tabs for any of the classic riffs that I've played in this video, you can find those in the link down below as well. Some of them I have adjusted the tuning of because some of them are either slightly sharp or tuned down. I've recorded them all in standard tuning for the purpose of this video as well. So please go and learn those riffs and enjoy them. And while you're down there letting me know what you think about the video, don't forget to hit the like and hit the subscribe button as well. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I will see you very soon.